Algerian President Mohamed Boudiaf addressing supporters with what turned out to be his valedictory speech. Amongst his last words were the prescient, "The life of a human being is very short. We're all going to die." Then came the havoc. After grenades were thrown at one side of the hall to distract, the president was cut down from the rear with bullets from a submachine gun. Eyewitnesses say the assassin, who was dressed in police uniform, stepped out from behind a curtain and sprayed gunfire into Boudiaf and more than 40 others. The 73-year-old former hero of Algeria's independence struggle against France had returned from decades of self-imposed exile to head the country's five-man presidential council less than 6 months earlier. His death marks the end of one period of violence and probably the beginning of yet another, in a country struggling to achieve a balance between democracy and Islamic fundamentalism. During Boudiaf's absence from the culture and people of his birth, he distanced himself from the corruption and misrule of the party he fought for, the National Liberation Front. He also missed the riots of the 80s, the subsequent promises for democratic reform, and the birth of the fundamentalist Islamic Salvation Front, FIS, the real political power base of the Algerian people, but one that's been stifled. In December's election, a majority voted for FIS. However, the results were annulled and a military-dominated junta was appointed instead. In cities that bear the scars of previous battles and years of decay, the future is uncertain for everyone as the administration does all it can to quell the rise in power of Islam. Since January, thousands of alleged Salvation Front supporters have been imprisoned. 7 of its leaders are currently facing conspiracy charges, and the dreams of an Islamic fundamentalist state are in disarray. Those who can speak for it do so in fear of their lives.
The present situation in Algeria is very dangerous because the current regime is politically dead. It only exists because it's backed by the military, whose forces are used against the people and effective opposition.
Even before Boudiaf's death, the unelected State Council had little popular support. Uncompromising control with security forces, always in high profile, endeavored to keep the lid on the country simmering under a state of emergency. Many blame the middle classes for failing to organize themselves politically and allowing the FIS its electoral success. Some of the better off turned a blind eye when the results were overturned because of their fear of a possible fundamentalist government. So now, in this politically confused and divided state, the military holds the power. The security forces' presence may bring some reassurance to the middle classes, but it also brings a reign of terror to the poor and any organization fighting for democracy. More than 150 are reported to have died so far. Worried by the political threat posed by the mullahs, the government displays its power at the mosques each Friday. In Bab el-Oued, a fundamentalist stronghold, people who usually pray in the streets are too intimidated to do so. The imam's voice no longer reaches them either, silenced by security forces' bullets.
The whole of the country is now a big concentration camp in which people are detained haphazardly. The firing of bullets, search operations and mock trials are a habit. The security forces are accountable to no one for their actions against the people, intimidating, killing and torturing.
Wanted posters are part of the government crackdown on all those associated with the outlawed FIS. A vast network of police informers is constantly on watch in the streets, forcing its leaders underground. But it's easy to hide in the large old city of Algiers. For most, though, despite the tensions, life goes on as normal. On Fridays, after prayers, crowds flock to the city's parks to relax. Algerians enjoy the art of conversation. Before the assassination of their president, the usual topic was whether FIS could ever offer effective leadership. The question remains. But in the Kasbah, newspaper criticisms have always been muted by the government's power to close them down at will. However, outspoken views do get an airing. Clandestinely published bulletins appear on the walls of the old city, calling for an end to torture and blaming the government for recent violence. It's the unofficial organ of FIS, and the link with the mosque is unmistakable. And every day the city walls carry simpler, starker messages, graphically illustrating the near total support of the poor for the Islamic Salvation Front.
Algeria is living a revolution now. The Islamic Salvation Front can help to find a solution to this crisis, but cannot stop the violence to protect the regime, even if it wanted to.
This admission from the FIS leadership leaves it to Algeria's imams to bear the responsibility for guiding the faithful. Appointed by the communities, they're the closest thing to democracy Algeria has. But although there's no official curfew, as the last of the daily prayers comes to a close, the streets quickly empty and tension is high. The harsh nightly security clampdown comes into force. For those who do venture out, the stop and search operations are frequent, and roadblocks aimed at seeking out arms and suspicious characters are commonplace. The symbol of national freedom has ironically become one of oppression as it stands guard over the memorial to the 1.5 million who died liberating their country from the French. However, the future of this troubled nation lies in the hearts and minds of those born since the War of Independence ended. 75% of Algeria's population is under 30. Half of those can't read or write, and unemployment of epidemic proportions has left them with time and energy to burn. They're disenchanted and easy to mobilize for a cause with which they can identify. And while their elders may caution patience and faith, unless the economy is corrected and the repression lifted, the young may yet be caught up in the worst civil strife the country has ever known, if that is the will of Allah.